50 types of real estate contracts and agreements with meanings. Purchase agreement, which means a legal contract between a buyer and a seller for the sale of property. Listing agreement, which means a contract between a seller and a real estate agent to list and sell the property. Exclusive right to sell listing, which means a listing agreement where only one broker has the right to sell the property and earn a commission. Exclusive agency listing, which means a listing agreement allowing the owner to sell without paying commission unless the agent brings the buyer. Open listing agreement, which means a non-exclusive listing that allows multiple agents to sell, with commission paid only to the one who brings a buyer. Net listing agreement, which means the agent keeps anything above a set price the seller wants. It's illegal in some states. Buyer representation agreement, which means a contract where a buyer agrees to work exclusively with one agent. Lease agreement, which means a contract that outlines the terms under which a tenant rents property from a landlord. Option to purchase agreement, which means gives the buyer the right, not obligation, to buy the property at a set price within a certain time. Rent-to-own agreement, which means a lease that includes the option for the tenant to purchase the property later. Land contract, which means the buyer pays the seller directly in installments but does not receive the title until full payment is made. Real estate assignment contract, which means a contract where a buyer transfers their purchasing rights to another buyer. Installment sale agreement, which means seller finances the purchase and buyer pays in installments. Contract for deed, which means, similar to a land contract, buyer gets possession but not the title until the full price is paid. Short sale agreement, which means an agreement where the lender allows the property to be sold for less than what is owed. Foreclosure sale agreement, which means a contract involving the sale of a foreclosed property, typically through a lender or auction. Real estate joint venture agreement, which means two or more parties agree to collaborate on a real estate investment project. Partnership agreement, which means a contract between partners sharing ownership in real estate. Real estate syndication agreement, which means an agreement where investors pool funds for real estate projects managed by a sponsor. Real estate investment trust, REIT, agreement, which means a contract establishing a trust that owns or finances real estate to earn income for shareholders. Escrow agreement, which means outlines the handling of funds and documents held by a neutral third party during a real estate transaction. Mortgage agreement, which means a loan agreement where the property serves as collateral. Deed of trust, which means similar to a mortgage, but includes a third-party trustee. Promissory note, which means a written promise to repay a specified loan under agreed terms. Real estate development agreement, which means between developers and municipalities or other stakeholders to develop land. Property management agreement, which means between a property owner and a manager to oversee rental property. Tenant estoppel certificate, which means a document where the tenant confirms lease terms and that no defaults exist. Hold harmless agreement, which means protects one party from liability for certain actions. Release of liability agreement, which means a document stating that a party gives up legal claims. Right of first refusal agreement, which means gives one party the first chance to buy a property before it's sold to others. Commission agreement, which means outlines how and when a real estate agent will be paid. Broker cooperation agreement, which means agreement between brokers to co-list or share commissions. Referral fee agreement, which means a contract where one agent pays another for referring a client. Real estate confidentiality agreement, which means requires parties to keep deal terms and information private. Letter of intent, LOI, which means a non-binding agreement outlining proposed terms of a future contract. Exclusive brokerage agreement, which means a seller agrees to use one broker only, but pays only if that broker sells. Subordination agreement, which means establishes that one lien is ranked below another in priority. Release agreement, which means releases one party from the terms of an agreement. Amendment to purchase agreement, which means modifies an existing purchase contract after it's signed. Addendum to purchase agreement, which means adds terms or clarifications to the original agreement without changing it. Disclosure agreement, which means requires one party to reveal specific facts, e.g., property defects, to the other. 1031 exchange agreement, which means enables a property owner to defer capital gains taxes by exchanging property. Tenant lease option agreement, which means tenant has the right to purchase the property during or at the end of lease term. Maintenance agreement, which means outlines who is responsible for property repairs or upkeep. Real estate settlement statement, which means final accounting of all costs and credits in a real estate transaction. Zoning agreement, which means agreement with local authorities about zoning changes or compliance. Easement agreement, which means grants another party the right to use part of a property, e.g., for utilities. Co-ownership agreement, which means outlines ownership rights and duties between people sharing property. Construction contract, which means between a builder and property owner detailing the construction work in terms. Builder warranty agreement, which means guarantees construction work for a certain period after project completion.